This is Jay Carpenter of the Phone Word Forum. Today is January 25th, 2012. It's approximately 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and today we are talking about toll-free broadband or free band with Box Top Solutions, and our guest today is Thomas Sachson, founder of Box Top Solutions. Thomas, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I expect people will be joining us here in a minute or two. And I apologize, and I'll apologize to everybody on the call, but the email that I sent out about an hour ago, apparently the formatting broke down and it was rather disjointed. So, Thomas, did you happen to get that email?
I did. It was fine. I mean, I just had to scroll down a little bit, and it just came up in little bits and pieces, but it was pretty clear what it sent out, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay. And you did get the attachments?
I got the attachments for this month, the materials that I presented at the GSMA plenary, and I also got the information about next month with Martin Giddis.
Great. Hello. Who just joined?
Hi, this is Robert Schaefer.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
Okay. Is this Jay?
It is Jay.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to talk to you. Expect a few more folks to join us. Thomas, while we got a little moment, Robert was with Verizon and ran the Enum trials for Europe and some other countries when those trials were underway. So
Got it. Yeah, we talk to Verizon reasonably often. So they had some interesting earnings yesterday or the day before. So data is becoming very important to them.
What happened with Verizon's earnings?
I think they posted a $2 billion loss last quarter.
Really?
So,
wow.
Yeah. I think most of the charges were related to the iPhone. So they subsidize it heavily. I haven't read the financial statement, but it was a pretty big number, the top line number, the headline.
Wow.
So I'm pretty sure that they probably had $2 billion profit the year before.
Wow. It's quite a turnaround. Hello.
Tom.
Hello, Tom. Welcome.
Hi, Jay.
We have Robert Schaefer and Thomas Sachson on the line so far.
Good day,
Just
gentlemen.
a few more will join us. Tom Ogle's on the line. Thomas, what I've heard or read, and I can't quite recall the source, but the cost of delivery versus the data revenue I've seen is supposed to cross sometime around 2016 based upon the current explosion in video and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think everyone can agree on is just, we're really, really in the early stages of data consumption. Video has not come online in any real meaningful way. Machine to machine is just getting started. User-generated content, high-def Skype or, video conferencing, films, HD, 3D. I mean, we're just getting started, and we're already seeing the mobile side get really constrained, and I think it's pretty much a certainty that the landline side is going to be constrained as well. I mean, I got AT&T, broadband into my home, and I don't even bother downloading a movie after 5 o'clock. No point. It just takes so long. So, because everybody's downloading it.
Who just joined?
Jay, it's Paul.
Hello, Paul.
How are you, sir?
So Paul Faust is with us. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, and there might be some other folks that join us. I am delighted to introduce Thomas Sachson of Box Top Solutions. I met Thomas last year at the Ecom 2011 conference in San Francisco, and Thomas gave a great presentation on toll-free broadband, and I think you've got a stellar lineup of people that have been associated with Box Top Solutions, and I'll just turn it over to you, Thomas, and let you further introduce what Box Top Solutions is and what it's, what you guys have been working on, where you're at with it, and a little bit of history on the company.
Yeah, I mean, we were. This was actually a project that was started inside of a company like Communications, which is a NASDAQ-listed technology company that it makes DSL chipsets. So it's a fabless semiconductor company based in Fremont. And
Thomas, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you for just a little bit. Are you using a handset? It's a little bit hard to hear you.
I am. Unfortunately, I'm on my cell phone today, so
okay.
Should I just?
Okay.
I'll just make sure that I speak. Is this better? I'm holding it real close.
Yeah, that's a little better. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, the project was actually begun inside of Iconos Communications, which is a DSL chipset manufacturer, and Iconos has probably shipped 400, 500 million chipsets globally into France Telecom, AT&T, SK, you name it. And they were looking at a particular challenge in terms of the next few years, which was the product that they make is actually a very good one. They put it in a two-wire box or a modem, DSL modem that the carrier deploys, and it runs for 5 or 7 years, 24/7 nonstop, and it never breaks. And people kind of forget that they have it, and it just sits in the closet. And that's great for consumers, and it's great for the carrier. It's not terribly good for the guy who makes the chip because you don't have a lot of churn. And so we started seeing that DSL penetration rates were sort of getting pretty high, and the growth was tapering off. And so we just took the decision that we couldn't really wait for the carriers to get aggressive about signing up new broadband customers. Given the way carriers work, they sort of have this ARPU target, and so long as they're signing up people that will pay a certain amount every month for broadband, they're not going to really try to go dig deeper and get that last 20 or 30% of the market. And we needed that. We needed them to go after that lower end of the market, because otherwise we were going to see the chip sales just sort of start leveling off over the next couple of years as you had penetration reach pretty high levels. We knew that making a faster chip wasn't going to do anything to accelerate adoption by the carriers or by the end users buying services from the carriers, or making even the chip cheaper. The chip was already pretty cheap. So we started focusing on the bandwidth. And we thought, if we can get the bandwidth to be cheaper, as well as the hardware, as well as the software, but the bandwidth is really the cost that keeps people offline, either in the DSL world or in the mobile world, then we might be able to roll out a business model on behalf of the carriers, partnering with the carriers, our customers, and that would make it more appealing for that low end to get online. Now, that's a really obvious observation. You make the bandwidth cheaper, people will come online. The problem is if you make the bandwidth cheaper, the carrier gets paid less for it, and it starts eating into their average revenue per user, their ARPU. So we had to come up with a way of making the bandwidth cheaper for the end user so that they would subscribe, but at the same time, the carrier got paid the same amount. And we gave it some thought, and we sort of came to the conclusion that the best way to do this was to tear a page out of the 1-800 voice model, which was if somebody is interested in sending end user data or merchandise information or content or film, TV, video, whatever, why don't they pay for the cost of the call? And I mean, this was at the heart of the 1-800 voice model for decades, which was the person that wants to get in touch and build a relationship with an end user, they probably don't mind paying the cost of the connection. I mean, if they're going to get a sale out of it, the cost of the call is quite de minimis, in terms of the overall pricing that's going on. So
absolutely.
We started thinking, okay, all right, who's done this before? And what we quickly realized was AT&T had actually been thinking about this a long time. They had filed some patents back in the late 90s for what was called toll-free broadband or toll-free data. And it had just kind of gone nowhere. It hadn't really done anything. It wasn't in the market, obviously. There was no meaningful reverse billing anywhere. And we figured out that the reason why it wasn't going anywhere was, despite that it's a nice idea to have reverse billing of data, so, if you go visit Yahoo's website, maybe they want to pay you, pay the carrier on your behalf because you're looking at ads. There was no way to actually implement it out of the carrier's network. The carrier's network is just not built for that. The BSS and OSS legacy framework for AT&T and for Verizon and France Telecom and BT and MTN and Tata and everyone in the world. It was built to push bytes left and right and left and right and do it fast and securely. It wasn't meant to sort of pull byte packages out of the stream, examine them, look at the headers, figure out where it was going, where it came from, and whether or not somebody had paid for it. I mean, you could do that, but it would just really gunk up the works. So it was very expensive to code for this sort of stuff, and there just was no way to even sell the bandwidth to Yahoo. I mean, how do you sell the bandwidth to Yahoo for a toll-free website? Because anybody can access a website from anywhere in the world, and so it's toll-free to somebody. And more importantly, it would require there to be some type of heavy-duty technology in the network, and that was something the carriers just couldn't do. They just, as much as they want to, and they realize that there's a play here, because they could be selling the bandwidth to Yahoo on behalf of the end user, the retail user. There was just no way of doing it. And then there were some other patents about putting the monitoring element inside the web page or the server of hosting the web page. So it would track the IP addresses of who visited, and if a visitor came from a particular prepaid or subsidized ISP, then the party that was maintaining that domain or that website would then write a check to the ISP and say, please make sure that your customer that accessed our website gets reimbursed for their bandwidth, mobile or landline. But then there's a problem of, okay, now the auditing and billing aspect is literally outside of the control of the carrier. The carrier is relying on Yahoo or Ralph Lauren or Daimler-Benz to actually track which people came into its server, how much bandwidth they gobbled up, sending and receiving, and which ISPs where the interconnect began had already agreed to be paid for by the website itself. And all of this would have been outside the control of the carrier. So that didn't work. And maybe it will work, but that was another air pocket of intellectual property that just had been on the books for several years, and it had manifested itself in the market. So we started.
Quick question, Thomas. Quick question. Excuse me. This is Jay. Now, was this prior to? Are you familiar with IMS?
No, I'm not. I'm afraid not.
IMS is a network architecture for the carriers, and Robert might help me with this, but it's basically a way to control traffic and quality of service and media delivery that I believe has been woven into the networks over the last probably 4 or 5 years. So I just wanted to get an idea, was the period that you're talking about, was that, 10 years ago, or about how long ago?
I got off the phone with the president of network systems, so the president of, I don't want to talk out of school, but it was one of Cisco, Ericsson, and Alcatel 2 weeks ago. And they said, we've been trying this for 10 years. We can't do it. So whether or not, they're using IMS or some other deep packet inspection or some other type of billing and auditing process, it's not useful. They can't sell it. They can't deploy it. That's the feedback that we're getting from the guys who are selling it to the carriers. Now, we're obviously hearing the same thing from the carriers, because they would love to sell bandwidth to Yahoo and Google and News Corp and ABC and NBC and the Department of Education and the National Institute of Health. And I mean, there's trillions of dollars worth of corporate customers out there that they could be selling their bandwidth to on behalf of the customer. And it's killing them that they can't do it. So there's definitely a desire by the carrier to do it. And we're pretty certain that Cisco, Ericsson, and Alcatel want to do it, but they can't, because it's just what they've sold them in the past just is not capable of handling a new layer of code, whether it's IMS or anything else. I mean, these frameworks may work for tracking bytes with a big fat tail. Maybe you can do it just for Netflix traffic on your network if you spend, tens of millions of dollars to code for that type of audit function. But what happens when you add Blockbuster on? And what happens when you add Google, YouTube on? And what happens when you add, a large, 10 different government agencies? And then what happens when you add another 100 small content providers and you add another 1,000 independent content providers? Now you're getting into tracking billions of bytes a second, pulling them out of the stream, putting them back in the stream, and trying to figure out who owns what and on what terms. And I'm not a technology, guru. I'm not an engineer by training. But what I do know is we've done a lot of due diligence the last year and a half, and we have a lot of engineers working on our team, obviously. This just isn't possible, and most of the reason is the process of actually pulling bytes out of the stream and auditing where they're going and why and who's in charge of paying for them. It's doable, but it slows things down. And if you do it once, okay, you can do that. If you do it twice, it's harder. If you do it 10 times, you're dead. The network just falls over. And they have trouble actually accurately tracking the byte consumption as is anyway. They sort of estimate it as far as we can gather. So the solution for us was, okay, we get that it's really hard to track lots of things in a network simultaneously real time. And if it's being done in the network, it is being done real time. So we thought, well, where are the bytes actually being consumed? The electric company meters my electric consumption at my house. There's a good reason for that. If you meter at the point of consumption, that's where the byte flow is actually taking place. And we started looking at this whole problem not from a network-centric perspective, but from an application-centric perspective. We thought, well, wait a minute, quite literally, those digital ones and zeros are coming into an application as ones and zeros. They're being registered and cached inside the application as it's processing those ones and zeros into analog, colors, and sounds. If that application is actually counting the bytes anyway, why don't we just build the application so that when it counts the bytes, it records them and reports back to us? And that made things unbelievably easy. At that point, what you can do is you can put a toolkit out there, an Android toolkit, give it to the developers. So long as that toolkit has the framework for the tariffs, okay, on this day in this network, a byte is going to cost you this much. During 7 a.m. to 12 p.m., it costs you this much. From 1 p.m. to this time, it costs you that much. On holidays, it costs you this much. Maybe it doesn't cost you anything, but you have to give us 5% of your banner roll, your advertising. Or maybe it doesn't cost you anything. You have to give me 5% of the download rental fee for the movie. And so the developer, which would be the content provider or the website provider, could take the toolkit, agree financial contractual terms with the carrier that provides the toolkit and create an application themselves. So the carrier doesn't even make the application. But that application would have rules buried in it to basically monitor, to turn itself on, to turn itself off, and report back what the data consumption was for that application, every 3 hours, every 6 hours, every 24 hours, whatever the business rule embedded in the product was. And this way you could have literally, hundreds of thousands of developers, because there are millions of Android developers already, creating content, creating applications where the tariff was already agreed with the carrier. And it's an automated process. It's just like buying Google AdWords online. You just tick a bunch of boxes as to what you're willing to pay for byte delivery, and then the application behaves accordingly. And if you've agreed to pay for the bytes from all day Monday, well then that application all day Monday to the end user, it's just green. It turns green, just like a green light. And then if on Tuesday you've not agreed to pay for the bytes because that wasn't one of the rules you chose, on Tuesday the application turns red. And on Wednesday, if you agreed, okay, I'll pay for every other byte, or I'll pay 50 cents for every $1 worth of consumption, well, then maybe it's yellow. And these rules can change from day to day, from hour to hour. You can put, I want to put 50 megabytes into the application, and then I want it to turn off. And then it'll reload with another 50 megabytes the next day, and then it'll turn off. So it can be green, and then slowly whittle down to yellow, and then whittle down to red. Or, you can have a running tally on the face of the app. There's no limit to the variability that you can put into these things. So you start with a set of very fixed and inflexible tariffs from the carrier, maybe only 20 options, based on the time of day, peak, off-peak, the days of the week, holidays, not, and what kind of content is being served. But by picking and choosing your own combinations, you could come up with thousands of permutations. And these permutations they're not built into the network. They're built in at the edge of the network on the devices. And if you want to change it, you don't have to pick up the phone and call AT&T. You just buy a new app. You pull the old one off the network through an update. You put the new one up with the new rules. So we thought we had a real breakthrough because from the network perspective, these are just clients sitting out in the cloud. Then our apps don't look any different to the network than Angry Birds. It's just something that's gobbling up bytes on a device with an IP address that's authenticated with the network. So we don't really require the carrier to change anything to engage in this reverse billing or toll-free mechanism. At the same time, it allows the carrier to sell bytes directly to institutions as opposed to end users, which is huge for the carrier. And then at the same time, they can sell bytes in the morning for less than bytes in the evening, or they can trade byte provisioning for a cut of the content or advertising revenue, so they become an affiliate. So the ability for them to mix and match and optimize their byte delivery platform and to have the institutional side bid for these bytes is actually pretty optimal. And all it starts doing is it just starts looking a lot like the rest of the world. I mean, if I buy my electrons from an electric company at 12 noon on a July day, they cost more than if I buy them at midnight, because it costs the electricity company more to deliver an electron to my house at 12 noon than in the middle of the night, because in the middle of the night, they don't have to turn on the gas burners to accommodate excess demand. Peak bytes, just like peak electrons, just like peak water, should cost more. And in the real world, peak something does cost more because it requires greater investment and infrastructure to deliver during peak times. So the carriers are very interested in having a mechanism to incentivize not only the institutional customers that are buying the bandwidth, but also their end users to start downloading during off-peak times. If they're going to watch a movie at night, if they can incentivize them to download it in the morning via one of these apps that are pre-bundled with free bandwidth, a green app, that's a good thing, because now all of a sudden, the end user gets free delivery of the byte. Now, of course, they had to have it delivered at 9 a.m. via this special app, but that's okay if it means you don't blow your data cap on your tablet or your cell phone. This is a good deal for the end user, and the content provider is happy because now they can differentiate with free delivery, just like the voice people did for 40 years. If you had a 1-800 number, you had a distinct advantage over your competitors who didn't have one. or just Amazon or, FTD Florist. Everybody does free delivery. It's actually pretty normal. Even Netflix was in the free bite delivery business. 10 years ago, Netflix established itself as a very innovative and consumer-friendly company by delivering DVDs directly to your door. Now, if you go and talk to Netflix right now, they'll tell you they were in the free DVD delivery business, and they saved you the trouble of going to Blockbuster to pick up a DVD. There was a cost associated with driving to Blockbuster. There was the gasoline, there was the time, there was the parking, there was the hassle. But from my perspective, and I think I'm correct, actually, they weren't in the free DVD delivery business. They were in the bite delivery business. They were bringing bites to my house, which I put into my computer, known as a DVD player, and those bites were translated from digital to analog and up on my TV screen. If Netflix actually embraced that model again and they said, well, we're going to do free bite delivery, but this time we're going to do it online, I think that they would do very well. And they may do this. We do try to get them to look at this. But, the downside from their perspective is, I don't want to get into this habit, or I don't want to set a precedent of where I'm paying for the bite delivery. Right now, it's the end user that pays for the bite delivery out of their own pocket. But we know that this is going to change. This is inevitably going to go away because of data caps. Because when you're on mobile phones, especially in tablets, when you're limited to a gigabit per month, what happens is that on the 25th, 27th, 28th of every month, people stop downloading on their tablets and phones because they don't want to go through their data cap. Because if you go through your data cap on an iPhone or an iPad, you pay another $20 for 200 megs. So that extra YouTube video you downloaded could cost you $20. And so what people are seeing is individuals are rationing their use as they get towards the end of the month. What this means is the content providers, when they see their revenues and their ad revenues start dropping off on the mobile side at the end of the month, they want to figure out a way, how do I get those people to start downloading again? I can't be capped. I can't have this glass ceiling over my business model based on the fact that there's a data cap. And the carriers aren't going to raise the prices on the end users too much. I mean, there's only so much they'll take. So the solution is going to be that the content providers, the merchants, the filmmakers, the governments, whoever wants to build the road out to these people at the end of the month, when the data cap is almost punctured, they're going to say, I'll just pay for those bytes so that they don't go over the data cap. I will make my own application and I will preload it with bandwidth so that when they know that they can always go to Yahoo or they can always go to YouTube, and they're not going to blow through their data cap because I'm going to be on the other side making sure that the bandwidth that they consume is paid for by somebody other than themselves. In this case, it'll probably be the advertiser or it's Google or whoever. But what that means is they're going to wind up sharing some revenue with the carrier, which is okay. They don't want to. The carriers don't want to abuse the content providers. They just want to, sell bandwidth, in a reasonable fashion so that everybody flourishes. It doesn't do anybody any good to push somebody out of business because you don't sell them the bandwidth cheaply enough. But in this particular model, the minute Yahoo puts an application out there that's green, and people realize, if I use the Yahoo Green app, I never go over my data cap. It'll be about 5 seconds before some clever 13-year-old figures out, or the parent of a 13-year-old figures out, wait a minute, this app that Yahoo gives me really is free. That's funny. For the last 10 years, I thought Yahoo was free. It wasn't free at all. I've been paying for the bandwidth all along. I've been paying AT&T $50 a month. Wait a minute. It's never been free. Ergo, if I go to Google right now, it's not free. So all of a sudden, the Yahoo Green app looks free, and because it is free, it's free content, it's free search, and it's free delivery. Whereas by comparison, the Google app, which is just a normal browser perhaps, or maybe it's a Google app I have on my phone right now, it's not pre-bundled with bandwidth, and all of a sudden it starts looking very unfree. Okay, the search is free, the content is free, but the delivery is not. And the minute that happens, I believe you're going to see people revolt or lash out against all of the content providers that are not providing truly free. And I think this will be an epiphany for the market because, the a 13-year-old can figure out that the data plan will last longer if they can use and download and use as many green apps as possible and avoid using their browser, they're going to. I mean, I'll tell my kid, don't use your browser. Use a green app. I'm sick and tired of paying the overage charges. And the carriers still get paid. The content providers actually will probably do better because they'll see more traffic. They're not encumbered by these data caps, which is a collar on their growth. But it will create sort of a race to create as many free apps as possible, because the minute all the traffic goes to a green app provider like Yahoo, Google's advertiser is going to wake up really fast and realize, wow, what really makes people gravitate towards a website or a service or an application isn't necessarily the quality of the content, it's how cheap it's delivered. Well, Domino's Pizza figured that out years ago. They probably won't make the greatest pizza in the world, but if you deliver it and you deliver it consistently for free, under 30 minutes, that becomes a really huge differentiator. And maybe you don't have to put as many toppings on. Maybe it doesn't have to be as good as that, gourmet pizza down on the main street. And I like gourmet pizza, and if I happen to be down there, maybe I buy it. But most of the time, convenience and free delivery means a lot to me. So I go with Domino's, and I'm fully aware of what the trade-offs are, but I like the free delivery. I think you're going to see the same thing in the online world, and it's going to manifest itself in this toll-free behavior. We've taken the position, and we built technology and our patents, and our whole pioneering effort is all based on the complexity and the auditing and managing of all these reverse billing activities, these 1-800 toll-free data billing, will be handled at the edge of the network inside the applications, because that's the only place you can handle complexity. You can have a swarm of millions and millions of apps with millions of different business rules. The network doesn't care, because what happens is each of those apps, they self-monitor how much bandwidth was consumed every day, and they follow their basic rules, and they report back to one server, periodically, and we take that data that comes in, we compare it to the original contract terms between the application provider and the carrier. We create a bill for whoever was buying the bandwidth. If it was Yahoo, we send a bill over to Yahoo. We send a statement over to AT&T, and we say, AT&T, expect to get $10 million from Yahoo for activity this week in the city of Los Angeles. Boom, done. And this model, again, is actually fairly well established. It's called MasterCard and Visa. They don't lend the money, they don't touch the money, they don't buy the goods or the services. They just track who owes who, and they net it out every day, and that's it. And all we do is we're just a bandwidth billing company. We track the bytes using the apps, and then we prepare a statement for one side and a bill for the other, and we take a commission for the trouble of basically collecting all these bytes from our family of apps. But this thing works, we think, and will work for a long time, in large part because the 1-800 model, I guess the gestalt, maybe that's the wrong word, the way people think about 1-800 is so deeply entrenched in sort of our culture. You can go to the ends of the earth, into a dirt hut, into a cave, and you'll find somebody who has nothing, but they will know what a 1-800 number is. They will know what a toll-free call is, and they will know that it's trustworthy. They will know that it will cost them nothing. They know that they won't be hung up on. There's no real reason for a lot of people even to use 1-800 numbers, but we're still running out of them. I mean, they're making 866 and 86 whatever. So as a technology marketing platform, it's incredibly successful. And it's hard for me to imagine that trusted platform and the feeling and the effectiveness of that platform is not going to manifest itself on the data side. It works very well on the voice side, and it's just been a question of how do you implement it in the data side, the digital world. And I don't think it's through toll-free websites, because that means you have to do the auditing on the web server, which is outside of the control of the carrier, which won't happen. You don't do it inside the carrier's network, because that thing was built for speed and for shifting bytes back and forth. and it's terribly expensive and risky to do. Your network could go down if you get it wrong. So it's just going to be too expensive to do, and they're only going to do it for really big customers. They're not going to recode the network to sell somebody $10 million worth of bandwidth. It's just not worth it. But if you do it in the applications were made to be built quickly, put on phones on a standardized universal platform like Android. They can be updated. They can be replaced. They're very secure. They're distributed by the carrier. They're sitting on the carrier device, so they control them a bit. And there's an army of developers growing, by 50,000 a month probably, doing Android and WebOS and Windows and iOS, who will build them for you. So they build them for the carrier. And so we think this type of app-centric toll-free billing paradigm will become standardized, and it'll make its way onto all devices in the mobile world. And then eventually, when we see bandwidth constraints on the wired side, DSL, fiber optic, because we think what's happening in the wireless side, because of bandwidth constraints with spectrum, it's going to happen on the wired side as well, because there's only so much pipe that's been put into the ground. There's only so much copper. There's only so much coax. There's only so much fiber. And once people start opening up these lines to do high-def Skype for 10 hours at a time, because grandma is going to be babysitting the kids from across the country on a laptop and a webcam, or people are downloading 3D video or high-def video, or they're keeping their entire film library up in the cloud and they want to download it real fast. I don't think we've even begun to see how much bandwidth consumption is going to be. And part of the solution there will be whoever's offering these cloud services or these video chat services or these delivery services, they're going to have to pay for the bandwidth delivery, because I don't want a $1,000 bandwidth bill every month, to access my $1,000 film library. I mean, that's crazy. But if I put 1,000, DVDs up into the cloud and they're all high def, which people probably will do, I think it's 3 gigs just to download one of them. Well, I don't want to go over my 100 gig landline cap, which I have already. AT&T already has that. They'll start throttling me or cut me off if I go above it too often. So we think this world of bandwidth is, it's really primed for a solution for a reverse billing or a sender pays or a third-party pays solution. And it's going to start first on the mobile side, because that's where you have the data caps, and so that's where the action is. But it'll eventually make its way into the landline side. But it's gonna be built on the foundation of people's familiarity and trust with 1-800, and that I feel pretty certain about. And
right,
and so that's what we do.
Thank you, Thomas. And just to clarify, although you're using the term 1-800 as a paradigm, everything that you've got in place doesn't use any kind of telephone numbering at all, correct?
Not at all. No. It's what we're borrowing from is the ethos of 1-800, which is people want somebody else to pay to build the road out to them. People want, if somebody's going to want to talk to me, they should pay for it. If someone wants to sell me something, they should deliver it to me for free. If somebody wants to make an inquiry of me, they should send the stuff to me and have me send it back to them, and they pay. This notion that, when I go to Yahoo, I'm paying to have the bytes delivered to me, and I'm paying to have the advertising and the banner rolls put in my screen, it flies in the face of everything we've learned about human nature the last 50 years. And it's the reason people have done it is I don't think they realize that actually they're paying. Because it's all been bundled in with their phone service. So they're just like, oh, this is just an extra service for voice. And what's happened over time is the voice part of the bill is getting smaller and smaller. The data portion is getting bigger and bigger. Everybody's going to start figuring out that every time they visit a website, it's costing them money. And they're going to start being very selective about who they engage with, for how long, and why. And sometimes they're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to go watch that cat video because it's going to push me over, or I'm not going to go look at my sports scores on ESPN because they don't love me enough to pay for the byte delivery, whereas I can go to Yahoo Sports and they love me enough and they pay for the byte delivery. Okay, they show me a couple ads along the way, but I don't mind. They love me. They're giving me the sports scores really for free, whereas ESPN is not, and so I don't like that. I'm just gonna react negatively when somebody suggests that I go to a red app or a web browser, because people will definitely understand it is costing them money. So, that's where we are. I would say that up until 6 months ago, this conversation probably wouldn't even be understood by a carrier. The vocabulary didn't exist inside of carriers. They didn't understand that data caps were going to change everything. Now, actually, it's getting pretty easy to talk to them. And the regulators understand what we're doing, and the regulators like this very much, because one thing we don't do is we're not slowing anybody down, we're not speeding anybody up, we don't block anybody. Show up based on just how the network is configured, just as it is today. If the network is clogged, then the bytes show up slower than they would otherwise. If the network is empty, they show up very fast. The only thing we enable is the shifting of the price, the burden of payment. We shift it from the end user to some other party. But we don't in any way restrict, prejudice, or prioritize any byte stream. And that's what net neutrality is about. If I speed up bytes going to you, by virtue of the pipe being a fixed size, it's static. If I speed up to somebody, I must, by definition, slow somebody else down. And that prejudices that other person who did not agree to be slowed down. So if you agree to pay $10 more a month to be sped up, somebody else gets slowed down, but they didn't agree to that. So we stay very, very far away from speeding up or slowing down. We are only about shifting the pure cost of that service at that particular instant from the end user to some other party, so that they can engage in an online activity and not blow their data cap. And that's it. And so the regulators love this. Regulators love free. They hate speeding up and slowing down, but they love free. And if you guys are all talking to lawyers trying to get them to write opinions and figure out, net neutrality, if you just, free is pretty safe. Speeding up, slowing down is pretty bad. So, you'll save yourself a bit on legal fees if you just get your lawyers to focus on that. So the regulators like us, the Public Utility Commission likes us, the FCC likes us. We feel we're definitely in the space of being a consumer advocate because we're getting free bandwidth to people that, have trouble affording to be online. We think it's great for people that can't afford to be online. I don't want to pay if I don't have to. We think it's great for content creators because they can go direct to the end user via an app, and it's a lot cheaper to pay AT&T to deliver their content, for AT&T to be the postman, as it were, and for them to pay for the postage, than it is for them to use the iTunes Store or Netflix or any other aggregator or middleman. In this world, you don't really need a middleman anymore. You just put an application out there, and that application goes directly to the artist, the musician, the TV producer, whoever made that content or that website or that business service, and you go straight to the end user, peer-to-peer. And that's the way the world is going to be in the commercial sense. So there's no reason to pay middlemen anymore. There's no reason to have complex distribution chains where everybody along the way is taking, a couple percentage points along. Leave those percentage points for the artists. Leave those percentage points for the end user. Just pay your postage or your delivery fee to AT&T, and you're on your way. And frankly, AT&T should get paid because they're maintaining a tremendous amount of infrastructure, and running a network capable of doing these things is not easy to do. It's quite expensive, and they have to leave it on 24/7. So we think it's good for carriers, content providers, content creators, I should really say, and end users. So
Thomas,
think,
this is Robert.
Sure.
I'd just like to jump in here because I don't have too much more time to stay on here. I got
Sure.
a meeting, but I want to comment and a question.
Sure, please.
My comment is that I can appreciate the concept that you're putting forth here and how it might be viable, but with my engineer hat squarely on, I have some missing pieces as far as the implementation of this in terms of the IP networks, and in particular, my question goes to the method of association that an application would have and how it would be, if you allow me to use the term, exempt from counting towards, service provider totals for caps. Can you just give me a high-level idea
Sure.
of if that has been established, and if so, how is that done?
Basically, we're not doing anything in real time. Okay, like I mentioned that if you try to track bytes in the network to tally up what's being paid for and what's not, and to make sure that something is netted off somebody's bandwidth usage, if you do it in the network, you're doing this real time, which is, that there's a benefit in doing that if it was possible to do it on any scale. What we literally do is we take our bandwidth, our applications are obviously monitoring how much they're consuming from minute to minute, from day to day. That's part of their just their basic operational parameters. Now, depending on what the carrier wants and how comfortable the carrier is in terms of maintaining accurate records, they may want those applications to report back to my company once an hour. Just shoot off a little text message, a little metadata saying, this application has consumed this much data today, and there's this timestamp on it, and we compare what it's consumed since its last timestamp, a report back to us. What we do is we aggregate all that information and we feed it back to the carrier, not to their network, but to their billing system. And we will feed it back to their billing system, maybe every hour, maybe every 6 hours, maybe every 12 hours. It just depends what the carrier wants. I suspect the carrier would be pretty happy getting it every 12 hours, because if somebody's about to go over their data cap, they can sort of, they can feel pretty comfortable that somebody won't accidentally go over their data cap, and then they charge them $20 for going over, and then they get a report from us that says, oh, no, you were supposed to knock off 200 megs because they consumed 200 megs in the last 12 hours. And then, instead of them going over 1 gig, they're back down to 900 or something like that. But whatever the carriers have a pretty good feel for what usage patterns are, and maybe they won't actually automatically knock somebody into an overage charge, the second it happens. So there may be some leeway. But we don't actually report these things in real time. But what we do is, we're really making use of caching the data and aggregating it on our side, and then we feed it back, as sort of a lump data feed or a cache data feed back to the billing side of AT&T, and then they go, oh, well, our network told us that they used, through the month of May, they've used 1.1 gigs. They are actually over by 100 gigs. We're going to give them an overage charge shortly, or a warning on an overage charge or something like that. But then when they get our message that said, oh, 400 megs was consumed by this particular phone or this particular tablet, and we can confirm to you that somebody else is going to pay you for that, okay, net out 400 megabytes from your own records, so and knock them from 1.1 gig worth of consumption for the month down to 700. And so we'll need to optimize that process with the carrier. We obviously don't want to do it every second. If we did it every second, the carrier would be able to relay to the end user, oh, you're about to go over your data cap. But one of the ways we think we can manage it actually fairly well is we can manage on the phone. We can install a meter on the phone. Google actually gives the meter away free right now, which shows how much bandwidth you've consumed on that device. And then we can also have our own other metering element, which basically subtracts out the bandwidth that we know is already paid for by somebody else. So even though the network won't have that information quite up to date, we could certainly have it pretty up to date on the device itself. But there's definitely a lag between when the device reports back to us and then when we report to AT&T. I don't think we want to start out this process doing this real time, a real time circle. If we can do it and it's not terribly difficult or costly on day one, we'd love to do that. But
I think what you're going to need to get this accomplished is you're going to need some fairly well-defined standards for information flow between the application layer or the end-user devices and the OSSs. And I don't know if that's already in place or you're going to drive that, but
we think it's already in place. I
okay.
mean, our discussions with the carriers is, it may actually report from the level of sophistication we need to actually report back into their BSS and OSS if it's not coming from their network. The problem is the technology that we would require is probably going to be 5 years old. So, they may have to go find somebody who understands how to re-implement it, but they have it. They've chucked millions, if not billions of dollars in trying to make this sort of stuff work. They have the systems in place to the nth degree on the billing side. What they can't do is they can't actually monitor and audit. Billing is the easy part. It's actually tracking the bytes inside the network, and to do that accurately.
Okay.
But if somebody's just feeding them the summary every 6 hours, this does not seem to even register as a discussion point with them.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Robert?
I appreciate you taking my questions in advance, and I'd like to thank Jay for inviting me to this call. And unfortunately, I do have to go, but appreciate it very much, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks, Robert. Thomas, would you talk about this very recent development with Orange in Africa, just to give people a sense?
Yeah, I don't know firsthand what's going on. We're hoping to hear back from Orange. We talk to Orange a lot. But it's good validation for the whole notion that somebody else pays. Basically, yesterday, Orange announced that for the entire continent of Africa where they operate, in every country in Africa where they operate, they will basically subtract out from a user's monthly bill the amount of data that's consumed when that person visits Wikipedia, any page in Wikipedia. So if they're downloading music or video or text or images from Wikipedia, from a Wikipedia domain, all that byte consumption will be credited, zero rated to all the end users of those devices, which is, Wikipedia is not typically all that data intensive. I mean, they do have multimedia and they're getting more of it, but it's a very interesting development because it's a recognition that in lower income emerging markets, people really crave free data, free access to data. And this was a smart thing for Orange to do because obviously Wikipedia provides a lot of very useful information to teachers and farmers and engineers and, students. And, for a lot of these people, their only real connection to the outside world is that cell phone. So Orange has agreed to provide this data for free. It's not clear to me whether or not Wikipedia is paying for the bandwidth that is being used to access its site, or whether Orange is doing it, or whether they're sharing the burden. I suspect Orange is paying for most, if not all of it, simply because Wikipedia doesn't have a lot of money. They're not-for-profit, and I can't imagine that they have, funds to buy bandwidth on behalf of their users, but it's possible. We also don't know how they're doing it. They may very well be doing it through an application that self-monitors, or they may be doing it inside the network. Like I said, if you're only looking to monitor and track data of one class, it's not that difficult to do, and especially if it's a network that doesn't have a lot of data going through it to begin with. So Africa is probably a good example of a network that video and a lot of these, very, very high bandwidth and data intensive applications has not really sort of manifested itself. You still got a lot of people that are 2G, and then a few 3G players, persons, in those markets. So it may actually be a very doable activity for them to monitor and audit these bytes inside the network. But if going forward they're going to do a lot of this, they'll certainly, in my opinion, they're going to have to do it at the application layer. And but it's just another example of the markets are moving towards free delivery in response to just economic realities of the next 2 billion people that are coming online. The next 2 billion people want to get online, but they're going to have a very low-cost bandwidth platform in which to go online. The scary part for someone coming online is not the computer or the phone or the tablet. The scary thing is that monthly bandwidth charge, because it very quickly eclipses the cost of the hardware and the software.
I completely agree. Are you aware, is the Orange Initiative in Africa, is that one of the first instances of the, toll-free broadband, sender pays, free band model showing up?
Facebook tried something a couple years ago called Facebook Zero. And I'm pretty sure that, and I don't know how successful it was. I suspect it was not very successful because the way it worked was the carrier allowed a mobile user to go to Facebook and they would zero rate the connection. And this was in-network tracking, obviously. And what would happen would be once you got to Facebook, if you started uploading video or downloading video or uploading photos, then the meter started running again. So it was sort of like, I would allow you into my house for free. You could step over the threshold in my front door for free. But if you immediately walked into the kitchen or you walked upstairs or you walked into the bathroom, you started getting charged again. And that didn't sit very well with people. And there was no real meaningful way to let them know that just because, they thought that all of Facebook was kind of free, but only certain activities in Facebook, the non-data intensive ones, were free. And I believe that Facebook didn't pay for it. I think the carrier just agreed to zero rate it as sort of a loss leader. Like, if we can encourage people to come to Facebook more often, then they'll start gobbling up more bandwidth. I don't know, it's been very hard to get information about what the mechanics of that really were in terms of who paid for what, and how it was managed. But my own perception is it wasn't terribly successful because people very quickly figured out that once they went into Facebook, sort of the zero rating stopped when they wanted to do other fun things. And that was not something that they had made clear to the market. And usually if you do a bait and switch on a person, they don't particularly care for it. I do years ago. You go on?
I was going to say 2 years ago, in my view, we were in a totally different environment. The explosion of video was not even close to what it is today. So,
yeah.
I think it. Go ahead.
I mean, I think from what I read, the Facebook Zero application or widget or whatever you want to call it, it was probably just a WebKit. I mean, if you really want to, really drill down as to what made it and what it was very popular. A lot of people downloaded it and used it. But I don't know if they used it once they figured out that it wasn't free bandwidth for everything Facebook. And I think a lot of people probably deleted it once they realized that it was only sort of free at first, and then it sort of became expensive again. So in one regard, I think it was probably very successful, and they got a lot of interest, and they got a lot of people downloading it. In terms of people using it today, I don't think anybody is really using it in any meaningful way. But it was one carrier. It was 3 across several countries in Europe and Eastern Europe. So that's the only other instance where I think you saw sort of something close to a reverse. I mean, it wasn't reverse billing because somebody else wasn't paying for it necessarily, but it was subsidized broadband to a particular destination.
Yeah. I think the Orange example is much more telling, and it'll be interesting to see what unfolds over the next few months with other carriers and other instances. But
yeah,
one thing I would like to add, to harken back to the fundamental model. The model actually goes back to the postage service or the postal service.
Mm-hmm.
The postal service really took off when somebody figured out, hey, the sender should pay for the delivery of the letter, because I believe they started out with the reverse, where the recipient of the letter would actually pay for the postage. And then somebody came up with the bright idea way back when, hey, let's flip this around, and then people started sending letters and people were happy to receive them. So the incentive set for the model, I think, has been well proven. My point to the toll-free telephone number industry is my view is this is inevitable. However, it's not necessarily the case that legacy toll-free telephone numbers are going to be the address that is used in the future for toll-free broadband. So, there are some serious architectural hurdles to get there. But what I'd like to do, since we're close to the top of the hour, I'd like to just open it up for questions at this point. Anybody have questions? All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thomas, I thank you very much for participating today. And I would like to bring everybody's attention to next month, next February, the last Wednesday in February, which I believe is the 29th. We will have Martin Geddes on talking about basically the same model. And Martin was the chief strategist for British Telecom, and he's been an author of the sender pays model for a number of years, or he's written numerous items about it. And one of the things that he's written recently is posted on his website, which is called, I believe, Connect, Interact, and Transact. And I would encourage everyone to read that paper. But Thomas, anything you'd like to say to summarize or?
No, I mean, just, the 1-800 is a very powerful concept. And I think, it behooves the telecommunications industry to try to build on that, because you probably just have never seen as successful a platform as 1-800 in terms of just moving product and services, through the system. It's been tens of trillions, if not more, of goods and services that have gone over 1-800 lines these past 40 years. And to just sort of abandon the concept because we're moving into new technology paradigms, I don't think is in the best interest of the carriers. I think the carriers should really try to transfer all of that goodwill and all of that trust and all of that marketing and branding power of 1-800 and to move it into new technical verticals, because it really is something that people relate to and understand deeply.
I agree. I think there's a brand, a paradigm, a trust factor that can really be leveraged upon. However, I can't emphasize enough, what a critical moment we are at in terms of, the juncture to do that. So, Thomas, thank you very much. We very much appreciate you participating, and your email address is on your presentation, and everybody on the list should have gotten the presentation. If you didn't, please email me or go to phoneword.com, and you can get my contact information there, and I'll be happy to send it to you. Thomas has requested that we not publicly post his presentation to the GSM, but he so kindly circulated. So even you can share it
feel free to share it internally within the carriers, but it's intended for a professional telecommunications professional audience.
Okay.
And Jay, this conversation will be available to listen to again by tomorrow or later tonight?
You can listen to it as soon as we hang up.
Okay.
It'll be available.
So I'm going to go through the presentation one more time and then revisit the conversation.
Okay, great. Yep.
Thank you so much.
The instructions for reviewing listening to this call are on phoneword.com under the PhoneWord Forum section. So,
all right.
I appreciate everybody participating, and look forward to you participating next month, February 29th.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.